There was a yacht party, and there's a Hotties for Harris party today for creators.
Hi, I'm on the ground in Chicago for the Democratic National Convention. There are hundreds of content creators here, and today I'm talking to one of them. Keith Edwards is a prolific content creator, YouTube star, and Democratic strategist.
Welcome back to the series where I show you all the completely insane things Donald Trump said at his rally that the media refuses to show you.
Keith and I are going to break down what it's like for influencers at the DNC, the Dems creator strategy, how the media is changing, and whether or not this is the first influencer election. Keith, welcome to Power User.
Hi, Taylor. Thanks for having me.
Okay, so both of us were at the United Center last night for night one of the Democratic Convention. First of all, can you start off by just tell us what the vibes were like?
I think the vibes were a little chaotic, but I don't know how many people are there. 30,000 people? 30,000 Democrats? So it's a logistical nightmare, and I do think they did the best they could, but the vibes of the logistics were quite challenging from an insider perspective. I don't think it at all came across that way on television, which is the whole point of this thing. And also, I do think that the energy is just so high. Like, I was on the bus on the way back, and everyone's super hyped up. So that stuff aside, I think the vibes are exceptional at the DNC.
So you're one of these hundreds of content creators here to cover the election. This is the first time a major political convention has even credentialed content creators. So tell me a little bit about what being a Democratic content creator, influencer, YouTube star entails, and how you came about, ending up at the DNC.
I'll start with the second question first, which is I actually signed up before the Joe Biden and Kamala switch happened. And I don't think they could give these passes away. So I was grateful to be accepted. I am a Democratic consultant and strategist, and I happen to do social because I think the best example you can give to clients is that you know how to do the work by doing it for yourself. And it has been a really interesting journey because I used to be called a Democratic strategist and now I'm called an influencer.
Yeah. And I feel like you're especially increasingly a YouTuber. I mean, your YouTube videos have just exploded in the algorithm. So for people that aren't familiar with your work, can you give us a little bit of a flavor of what you're doing online?
Yeah. So I respond to the news as it happens. I like to give political analysis. Pete Buttigieg just gave a masterclass on Fox News on how to take their lies, throw it back at them, and try to inform the audience of the truth. It was a sight to behold. It literally is going viral right now, so I wanted to show you this as soon as I saw it. YouTube has been a new thing for me. I have been on there for 2 months, and I have 140,000 subscribers, which is crazy. A lot of it is clip-based, so I find a clip that is interesting, and then I surround it by analysis or commentary, and that's been just doing quite well for me.
Where does social media rank right now for the Harris campaign in terms of where they're prioritizing their efforts in terms of messaging, marketing, and their broader media strategy?
I think they really understand the importance of digital. As you know, we're all increasingly more and more online. I do think this creator space is a new thing. The way I like to compare it to is, I think the first presidential televised debate was in the 60s. I don't know how long TVs were around before that. So it was a long time to get to that point. And in the White House, for instance, there's a press briefing room. I don't know if there's ever going to be a creator briefing room, but these spaces had to be created, thought of. And so I do think that campaigns are figuring this out as this creator economy grows. They understand the importance of it, but I think we're all creators and campaigns and strategists are just trying to understand the best way to use everyone effectively.
Yeah. And what has the experience been like for content creators? Because I feel like it's been a little bit different compared to some journalists that I've talked to. Content creators, it sounds like, were treated to some yacht party. It's been very fun. There's been lots of programming for them. Whereas I feel like journalists are pretty much, it's like, show up, get in line, write your story. They're not necessarily throwing parties for us. So, what's on the calendar for content creators this week?
Yeah, there was a yacht party, which I did not attend, but I'm told it was fun. And I believe there's a Hotties for Harris party today for creators. It's interesting. I mean, I think for me, being more of like a news political analysis creator, I don't think I necessarily need that to feel bought in. The fact that I'm here in a historic moment is enough. But I can understand if there are influencers who are more used to politics is not their typical type of content. I think it makes sense to do something like that that makes it feel a little bit more bespoke.
Yeah, let's talk about how this program came together. So you applied, as you mentioned, before, all of the craziness, the big switch. Do you know anything about how they decided who to approve and what mix of creators to invite to this event?
I don't know. I do know that there have been a lot of creators who did not get accepted. So it wasn't like, whoever applied, come on in. They were definitely very strategic about who they wanted to be here. I have no idea how that process went. I think it's amazing Hassan Piker's here, who is like not necessarily.
Okay, we have to discuss this because I would say the common theme of most of the content creators that I've spoken to and talked to is that they're very excited to be here. For most of them, it's their first convention and they're really just taking it all in. The content is very promotional. It's very much like, silly, fun things. And look, I did that. I did a Snapchat show back in 2016 where I was interviewing people, about their outfits, the different delegates, right?
That's a good idea.
But they seem very positive. Got to steal it. I saw those people with the Texas light up hats last night. But, I feel like there's certainly not a lot of content creators that are critical of the administration, the current administration or the Harris campaign generally. But when you walk to Media Row, you see Fox News has a giant space. The Epoch Times, a very well-known far-right disinformation outlet, is still credentialed and actually has space on Media Row. So I guess, yeah, how do you think they're navigating that with creators? Because it seems to me they're kind of like, it's kind of unclear whether the creators are there like more marketing or press. Like they want to treat them like press, they're credentialed like press, but they're only credentialing friendly creators. Is that the case?
Absolutely not. Hassan is a great example of that. Hassan is definitely Team Kamala, Team Tim Walz. At least that's what I've been gathering from his live streams. But he's also been extremely critical of the Democrats and especially of Biden. And I think that is like the main difference between Democrats and Republicans is that we allow dissent. We're not a cult of personality. You're allowed to have opinions, maybe really big opinions outside of the main Democratic messaging. And you're still allowed in here, and I think that is something that we should really value, not only for the Democratic Party, and hope that the Republican Party can get there again too, because dissenting voices are really important when it comes to big political parties. You have to know where the line is sometimes, and I think that it is critical that people feel bought in, even if they're not towing the Democratic Party line every single day. To me, that is, you're getting towards cult territory. So it's good that someone like Hassan's here.
I think that the fact that they brought Hassan is so incredibly, when Hassan texted me yesterday and said that he was coming, he was like, we're just discussing credentials. And I was like, are you sure you have credentials? Like, are you sure? He was like, no, my management company got it. And I was just shocked because I think no one has been more outspoken about the war. When you look at the content creator, industry, just the stuff that's going on with Israel, Palestine, Hassan has been so incredibly vocal. I was with him actually all yesterday, earlier in the day at the protests, and he came straight from covering those protests, speaking to, the pro-Palestinian movement on the ground, to being inside the DNC and covering it very well. And I wonder if there's a lot of creators outside of Hassan. I feel like Hassan is definitely opening the door. But aside from Hassan, do you see a wide diversity of views, or is it still pretty narrow?
Definitely. Obviously there's someone like me who is, I'm just, I'm here to help Democrats win however I can. But I do think there are some folks here that their vote needs to be won. And I think that's important.
Yeah, I noticed a lot of creators too that weren't necessarily overtly political in their content, or maybe even, Tony P. I ran into him yesterday, a famous DC influencer who has never overtly expressed support for the Democrats. He said he finally came out and gave his endorsement online, apparently yesterday. But they're more focused on issues or lifestyle things, or they sort of speak to a specific demographic that the campaign really wants to target. It's interesting to see those people also get political. And just sort of in line with that, as a content creator, are there any sort of restrictions or guidelines on the type of content you can create? Are they giving you any sort of rules? Don't post this and that. You can only post here. Tell me what that's like.
Nothing like that at all. There's been absolutely no guidance, nor should they. They would, if they did that to a reporter, imagine they did that to you, Taylor.
Oh, please. I would say go fuck yourself.
Exactly.
But it's interesting talking to some of the content creators because some of them wanted more guidance. Like I think they're so used to getting these briefs from, whether they're going on a trip or whether they're going on this. And I think a lot of them were quite shocked to have the amount of freedom that they have where it's just like, hey, show up, do what you do, and we'll see. The Democrats have also set up this app called Greenfly, where content creators have access to real-time footage, information, graphics, things that they can share. Yeah. Which it really seems like they're trying to facilitate just content creation in all of its forms, which is something I don't think the Republicans had. The Republicans also brought 70 content creators, but as you mentioned, these are diehard Republican loyalists. They didn't have any sort of liberal content creators at their event. Having all of these people here, so far, I don't think any huge gaffes have happened. But is it also a liability for the Democrats? What are they playing with fire here? And, there are so many moments that can potentially go viral in a negative way for them. I mean, I saw one clip that was all over TikTok and Twitter and Instagram this morning of a delegate hitting a pro-Palestine uncommitted delegate over the head with one of those signs that was the giant sticks. It's not a great look. Of course, it's not like a lawmaker was doing this, but, having all of these eyes on these little moments, those are things that maybe cable TV wouldn't have caught. So how much risk is there with this strategy?
There's a bit of risk involved because some creators will do anything for clout. I think the DNC was probably really did a lot of due diligence to make sure that folks who came here didn't do content like that, gotcha content. But there is always inherently risk, but that's the same with like Fox News, like that you can't control an outcome. And I think we kind of have seen that if you try to get too controlling with the outcome, it actually has a negative effect anyway.
Yeah.
So it's better to have folks show up, give them a good experience. And, I do think that their vibes are great. So the content's going to reflect that, but I do think that it is always inherently a little risky.
It's also interesting to see the way that they set up areas to create content. They had this blue carpet the creators could walk. They had the creator lounge. I went upstairs yesterday to the meme room, which was just this big room kind of outside the press and creator area where they had food and snacks and you could sort of create content together. And it was cool to see just the community that they were building as well, like among the content creators. They put all the creators in these big chats so they could connect with each other. And it seems like a lot of these creators are also building connections and collaborating with each other, creating this broader network that they can use for messaging.
Yeah, I mean, there's a WhatsApp chat and, one thing about me is I'm really good at tweeting. And so I have been flying off with some commentary in the WhatsApp chat. And, I've probably connected with people from there on Instagram who've added me saying like, you're so funny on the chat. I had to add you. So like, it is creating like an ecosystem for us that maybe wouldn't have been there otherwise. It's been great.
There's been a lot of discourse in terms of, the Harris campaign leveraging the internet and being very online, right? It's just, even since with the brat memes, the coconut stuff, is there a worry that they're leaning too far into the meme culture? Like, where does the line draw between, I guess, leveraging the internet, owning the internet, and becoming kind of cringy? And is this something that they're aware of and working around, addressing, or do you think that they are not aware of these potential pitfalls?
I think they're doing a great job. They're definitely aware of it. I think they're really towing the line because, as you know, meme culture starts from the bottom up, And as soon as someone like Kamala Harris were to say something coconut related, it would be over, But I think it really goes to show that they've been really restrained about how they engage with the excitement and the content that's being created online for Kamala and for the campaign by kind of acknowledging it, but still allowing it to kind of build on itself. There's no finer point than the fact that Kamala Harris has never really acknowledged any of that stuff happening on the stump or in an interview. I do think it is a campaign's job online to make sure that the base feels heard and respected. And in this sense, that is the meme. So it's good that they have like embraced it a bit, but I don't think they're owning it like they did with Dark Brandon. Dark Brandon became a part of the campaign. And in that way, I think that's a good lesson because it kind of killed the engagement from normal folks.
Yeah, yeah. So Harris has not released many policies, but sort of assuming that she falls in line with a lot of Biden's stances on tech, I was at this content creator event last week for a bunch of content creators at the White House, and they were talking to the content creators about legislation, things like the Kids Online Safety Act or removing anonymity from the internet. These are actual policies that would devastate the content creator industry. And same with the TikTok ban, right? We know that over a third of Americans between the ages of 18 to 29 are getting their news on TikTok. A lot of these content creators at the DNC rely on TikTok for their livelihood. How do you think the content creator world will react, once they start to realize the actual tech policies that might affect their direct livelihood that Kamala might continue,
Well, I don't know. I mean, we haven't gotten, the beautiful thing about Kamala Harris's campaign is that it is an extension of Biden's successes, but it's also a new beginning. And so we don't know what those policies are going to be. And I hope we find out. It would be nice to know. You
think she could reverse the TikTok ban somehow?
I have no idea. But she has shown that she is willing to be independent, especially around she's been much more out there about the plight of the Palestinian people than Biden has been in the short 4 weeks, So I just want to give her space to surprise us.
So it seems like they've got content creators in every single genre at this event. I mean, from cooking people to just politics people to new, literally name a genre and there is a creator in it at the DNC. What corners of the internet are they still struggling to win over? What content creators have they not reached, and how can they reach those corners online? What areas of the internet is the Harris campaign still struggling to reach?
That's a good question. I think very online men are hard for the campaign to reach in general, but especially in online spaces. That has been an area that Trump and the right has done a really good job of capturing their attention of. I don't know what the solution for that is, but that's, again, to bring it back to Hassan, who has a very, very strong online. I think he's one of the only left.
You think Hassan is going to save the democratic internet?
No,
I know he does have a very online. Yeah,
I think it's
he's
important
a crucial linchpin. Yeah.
Yeah, and so my hope would be I would love for there to be 10 more Hassans, because the right has 20 versions of him with 4 times the audience. Wired did that amazing kind of visualization of what influencers look like on the left and on the right. And on the right, it's all men, and they have huge followings in comparison to the left. So there's a lot of work to be done about building up the creator space, and it's super important. It's the reason why the right has been able to capture so much young white men, is because of their investment in creators. This is the beginning of the battle for the war of attention. This DNC is just a great example that they understand this is where the puck is moving to.
Yeah, I know. I think it's just a lack of funding, and it's difficult, right? The right, as I wrote about extensively in my book, the entire right-wing media ecosystem has always been very personality driven, even since the days of talk radio. They embraced blog culture, internet culture very early. These platforms are set up to incentivize extremist content, often right-wing extremist content. And they always treated content creator people almost as legitimate media. Whereas even today, even in this event, right, we still have these traditional journalists snubbing their noses at independent media, or sort of thinking of it as less than. And certainly independent media, as in content creators on the left, are not getting the big funding. I mean, maybe some of the centrist ones are, but the more progressive internet content creators, Hassan built himself up through Twitch. He's not getting funded by Mark Andreessen. There are no sort of progressive billionaires that are funding a progressive media ecosystem. And I think that's I think that has to change.
Them. But I will say this, just another example of how seriously they're taking it. On Media Row, like you mentioned, is Fox News, CNN, MSNBC. I think News Nation's there. And so is Brian Tyler Cohen on that same row. And Brian Tyler Cohen is one person with just along right there with billion-dollar media organizations who have been around for decades. So they understand. If I'm CNN, I would be worried, because I'm wait, Brian Tyler,
Oh, yeah.
So,
I mean, you would think that these journalists would have some, like, they would wake up and realize that like their world is crumbling and they live in an alternate reality. It's not 1995 anymore. So when we talk about this battle for the internet too, I think we have to look at the platform landscape on a whole, right? On that fantastic Wired piece that McKenna Kelly did, you saw on the right, Elon Musk is huge. X has, Elon's undeniably using X to try to swing the election for Trump, right? He's openly out there pushing stuff. The algorithm rewards that stuff. There's also this entire right-wing social media ecosystem, right? You have platforms like Rumble, Truth Social, Kick, these live streaming apps, like all of these apps that are built to facilitate that stuff. Is there any equivalent on the left?
No, but the way I kind of look at the internet, my kind of metaphor is like they used to call it the liberal media. And I think to some extent that was actually true. I think most people are liberal. But I do think that as things have gotten more online, conservatives, because they weaponize outrage content, they're very extreme. That's things that algorithms really reward. And so the internet, I think, is more like conservative media. And so it makes sense that they're kind of winning that more. There aren't liberal spaces, but I think that's because most media is inherently liberal because most people are inherently liberal.
But if the old media is dying, it's going to be gone. Are we just going to all get our news from conservative spaces online? That seems like a bad situation. Well, because you have the mainstream platforms increasingly restricting political content,
I know,
right?
it's awful.
Meta, very well, right? Tell us a little bit about what Meta's been up to with politics, right?
Yeah, so Threads, which I'm on, I think I'm one of the biggest political influencers on Threads, and Instagram, owned by Meta, has made a decision to not amplify political content, not even political content, political creators. So they basically shadow ban a creator's account, and only people who follow that account or people who have clicked a random setting in Instagram will be able to see
deep in the settings.
We'll be able to see political content. And I do think that it is an inherently political decision to do that. And I do think that when we are fighting this war, like you talked about, with conservative social media companies online, it's like we are kind of like fighting with just our fists when they have real weapons. So I don't know I don't know how to solve this. I don't know if it's like, I don't know, like maybe I'm crazy. Like, could we actually come together and legislate a way to fix this? I don't know. I don't know what the solution is, but I don't think taking political speech and putting it on the same level as misinformation is the way forward.
I mean, look, misinformation is real, right? No one is saying that conspiracy theories are real here, but should the platforms be the ones just, mitigating that? Because ultimately they're going to abdicate that responsibility and they're simply just going to ban all content. Of course, that's bad faith. But like you said, there has to be a better solution because we desperately need to protect our right to speech online and have places for free expression. I'm a huge fan of Substack for this reason. Of course, there is tons of misinformation in some of those email newsletters, but at least it's not outright downranking and hiding people. Because as you said, restricting political content, and by the way, they define political content as anything touching any sort of social issue. So reproductive justice, influencers, content creators about LGBTQ issues, these are all deemed political. That in itself is a political action. And it's one that privileges the right, that benefits the right, because the right-wing trad wives and stuff, they're not considered political. I think that the fact also that we have this tech duopoly of Meta and Google is also going to be a challenge.
Well, here's the thing too, is like, we can debate whether or not they do a great job, but people, companies that make food have to make sure the food is edible and isn't going to kill you. And so I do think that
theoretically,
I don't
know if food's a good example because we have terrible food safety.
Okay, I know it's not the best example, but just give me let's try it. But there is an FDA. Okay. And I do think that it would be great if there was some sort of way that we could legislate companies who are like Facebook, Meta, Twitter, that they have a responsibility to make sure that the content out there is not going to kill you.
Yeah. I think not killing you, great. I'm very wary of any sort of government agency legislating anything around speech because of how wrong it can go. Even just that determination not kill you. But yeah, we definitely need a better system. And I think we need more diversity of thought and discussion online. And it's very hard in this age where, as you said, just political content is restricted. Meanwhile, we've got Elon Musk and all these platforms. So I just want to end it by giving some of our listeners a little bit of a landscape. You know, if they wanted to follow along, see some of the recaps of this DNC content, who are some people to follow?
I think you could follow me at Keith Edwards. Emily in Your Phone is she's been doing some great content on Instagram.
I saw her last night. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, you saw her?
Yeah.
They're showing a side of the DNC that I don't think people would see otherwise. Like they went and showed one of the phones you have to use to like send up your votes for the delegates. So it's an interesting look inside. I think those are some good content creators to follow along with.
Yeah, there's also a lot of content creators covering the protests here. And I think that's an interesting dynamic too. You've got the content creators on the inside, those people that you just mentioned. And then there's tons of content creators on the outside. Ariana Afshar, who is a Twitch political content creator, news streamer, she just announced that she's flying to cover and interview a bunch of these pro-Palestine protesters. So I feel like no matter what kind of content you're looking for related to or around the DNC, there is a content creator covering it.
Absolutely.
All right, Keith. Well, thank you so much for chatting with me today.
Thanks for having me. It's been great.
All right, that's the show. You can watch full episodes of Power User on my YouTube channel at Taylor Lorenz. Power User is produced by Travis Larchick and Jelani Carter. Our video producer is Brandon Kiefer. Our executive producers are Zach Mack and Nishat Kurwa. Power User is part of the Vox Media Podcast Network. If you like our show, give us a rating and review on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you listen. We'll be back next week with a brand new episode of Power User.